Hey everybody, this is Erica, the technology nerd who likes to film stuff, and it's now time for part 2 of the LG G4 review, so let's get into it. Alright, so in this video I don't have too many topics that I'd like to talk about. I do want to talk about things like connectivity, battery life, but a big huge meat of this video is going to be about the camera and the performance of the camera. So for connectivity, everything that I have used on this phone, connectivity-wise, works just fine. Whether it be phone calls, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, GPS, I've had no issue with anything. Nothing that's even remarkable to even mention. Everything's worked just fine. I think that for phone calls, that this is a loud enough speaker for speakerphone. I did mention a little bit about this speaker. I think that LG has kind of placed this as an afterthought. The only thing that I can really remark is that it's not the best sounding speaker, but it does get quite loud, such as working for GPS and also working for speakerphone. I can hear everything as loud as I need. Other than that, there's not much more to say. Now, in terms of battery life, underneath this back cover, this is a removable back cover. Thank you, LG. They are pretty much the only mainstream phone that we're seeing around right now that has a removable back cover and a removable battery. 3000 milliamp hours, same size as the G3. This has got Quick Charge 2.0. Not at first, but now the retail models should have that available and working. So what is battery life like? Well, I don't notice that this phone lasts an incredibly long time. I noticed that it's got pretty good standby time, so it feels like the phone is lasting longer. But in terms of on-screen time, I'm struggling to get over 4 hours. I can hit about the 4-hour mark with the Galaxy S6. On this, I can hit a little bit over the 4-hour mark. The most I've seen for myself is 4.5 hours. So you can see there's that 4-hour mark with 7%. Here is that 4-hour mark with 9%. Here is that 4-hour and 12-minute mark with 10%. And when I really ran it down and was doing a lot of heavy tasks, I got 2 hours and 32 minutes with 10%. So I see that it's pretty constant. I am guilty with keeping this display up pretty high. I will usually keep it around 60 to 70% because this is not a very bright display, at least mine isn't. That's something I discussed in the display section. LG claims that this is a 20% brighter display, but mine is measured to be the same brightness as the LG G3. Now there might be some variations across panels, but in order for me to get a decent brightness, I have to keep it jacked upward. And I noticed that, yeah, that affects the battery life. So I feel that this phone does last me throughout the day, but if I'm going to be doing some heavy tasks, which is what I do a lot because I use my phone as a mobile office, doing social media, checking emails, watching a lot of YouTube videos, Netflix, I can get through the day, but I get anywhere from 2.5 hours of on-screen time to about 4 hours or a little over 4 hours of on-screen time. So that's going to be different for you depending on how many times you actually need to have your display on. The standby time seems to be good, so keep that in mind. It's not the best battery life, but it does hold up throughout the day. You do have Quick Charge 2.0, and you can also simply just switch out that battery. So now I wanted to take a second to thank my sponsors over at Audible.com so much for making content creation possible. If you don't know who Audible is, they're a leading online provider of downloadable audiobooks with over 150,000 titles and so many different genres. One of my favorite things to listen to would be books that have been turned into movies. And if some of you aren't aware, there is a new movie that's coming out very soon. It's called Jurassic World. So I've been curious to listen to the book that has started it all by Michael Crichton. That would be Jurassic Park. So I'm really curious to see what the differences are between the movie and the book. I'm hearing that the book is actually a lot better than the movie. So that is one thing that I am discovering right now. And I've been listening to the book on the LG G4, playing around with these smart settings, being able to plug in my earphones and having that Audible app pop up. So if you're curious to check out this book or any other book, please follow audible.com/Erica. You can try out Audible service for free and also get this book for free. And if for some reason you don't like this book, you're free to exchange it at any time with no questions asked. And also, since Audible is an Amazon company, you can log in with your Amazon information, and it's very easy to access your library of all your different books. So if you want to try out this book, again, try audible.com/Erica. Let me know what you think. I'm so excited for Jurassic World. Let me know if you're excited too. Now let's get on to talking about the camera or cameras. We've got a 16 megapixel camera here with optical image stabilization. We've also got an 8 megapixel camera here on the front, which is nice. Running through the specs of the camera, we did say this is 16 megapixels. It's 1.8 aperture lens. So you've got a really nice and wide aperture lens here to let a lot of light in. We've also got laser assist here for the autofocus, and I did have a chance to test that out in complete blackness. I'll show you a resulted image from that. Then we have a single LED flash, and then we have a sensor here that measures RGB, red, green, and blue wavelengths to try to get proper white balance. So what I can say about the camera, just as a little bit to give you an idea, is that this is a very pleasant camera to use. This is a camera I've been quite excited about once I had a chance to go out and actually start using it. It's a camera that I feel that I can take out with me and not feel nervous that it's going to give me a poor result. So many different camera phones I've had lately, like the M9, even the M8, have had pretty bad quality, and I get nervous. Like, I don't know if it's going to come out well. We really rely on our camera phones to take good pictures these days because, as we've all heard, the best camera that you have is the one that happens to be on you quite often. This one has a pretty good camera and a lot of fun features to go with it. It's an advanced feature type camera, especially in comparison to the other cameras out on the market, even in comparison to the Galaxy S6. So starting off with the interface, we've got modes for just about everybody, whether it be for the layman or for somebody who really wants to have a more advanced mode to toy around with all the camera settings. So we have a simple mode, an auto mode, and a manual mode. Probably the simplest of modes that we have on this camera is to just double hit the home button from when the display is off. It's going to activate the camera for you. Now by default it comes with a setting. This setting is called Quick Shot, so when you hit that down button twice, it's going to not only turn on the camera for you, but it takes a shot instantly. And I find that it does it so quickly that I end up taking a lot of pictures of my feet, so it's really not useful at all. It's something I disabled pretty much immediately. It's a bummer that this double click hitting the bottom button doesn't activate anytime that you want it to. It only activates when the display is off. So underneath this simple mode, all you have to do is simply touch the display and it's going to do everything for you. You don't have to do anything. So there we have my little happy Aibo figurine there. So I don't think it can get more simple than just to simply point and shoot. I noticed that it's not the absolute fastest at taking pictures, but it's decent. And then we have the automatic mode where you have a couple of more settings. You can see you control flash. So you can press this button to turn it to the front-facing camera, or you can simply just go up like this on the display. I wonder if you could do that in the simple mode as well. Let's try it. Yeah, you could. So underneath the simple mode and the automatic mode, you can simply just swipe your finger from one of the sides of the display and it's going to switch the camera for you. We have option for mode, so you can use auto, you can use panorama, or you've got the dual window function, so you see we have the front-facing camera at the same time as the back camera. We have the ability for HDR on, off, or auto. I would just keep this on auto. I see that a lot of the time HDR is needed. So just keeping it on auto doesn't have me having to keep changing the setting all the time. You've also have the ability to change your aspect. You've got 16:9, 4:3, and 1:1. Then underneath the video camera here, we have Ultra HD, Full HD, and HD. So this will be 1080p, this would be 720p, and 4K. Then you've got slow motion at 720p. Unfortunately, we don't have 60 frames per second. There's no 1080p at 60 frames per second. I'm sure this device is capable of doing so, but it's just not enabled. That's something that I'm going to be looking for on xdadevelopers.com. Hopefully someone will make a mod for this. I would really enjoy having that. Otherwise, we have the voice shutter. You can say things like cheese, smile, whiskey, kimchi, LG. And we also have the matrix for framing here. Now, like the G3 before this, we have the ability to put our hand out for a gesture shot, close our palm, and it's going to take a picture. Hello! And we've also got a burst mode. And it takes 30 frames before stopping. We've also got something similar for the front-facing camera. You can hold down on the camera button and it will take 4 shots for you. Does it pretty slowly though. Stop. And we've got a live makeup button here. Underneath the selfie settings, you can see we've got a couple of things here. You have HDR, actually, for the front-facing camera as well. We can choose our aspect. We can also choose whether we want it to be HD, 720p, or full HD. We've got voice commands, we've got a timer, we've got the ability to mirror the photo that we take, and then we have this feature that allows us to take a selfie really quickly, and if you hold it up towards your face, you'll have a chance to look at it for a second. So let's just say hello. If I hold it upward, it shows me my selfie, like that. So all of those features are great and all, but I think that the star player here is the manual mode. So starting with the left-hand side here, everything pretty much looks the same, except for what we have right here, which says RAW and JPG, or just JPG. So you have the ability to take just a JPG, or you can take a raw image with a JPG, and that's really nice. So essentially, to have a raw image, you have just the uncompressed and unprocessed image from the sensor. You can take it into Adobe Lightroom, do what you want with it, or you can just be happy with JPG and deal with LG's post-processing of the image. You have the settings here, everything looks the same except for down here we have an option for histogram, so you can turn that off and on. Then along the bottom here we have a couple of really great options. We have white balance, so you can choose whether you'd like it to be warmer or cooler. And of course you can just hit auto. Then you have manual focus, so you can go to macro or infinity, or just hit auto if you'd like. You've got the option for exposure. You have ISO, you've got the shutter speed, or how long the shutter is staying open. I think this is really nice because most of these camera phones don't have this option. I'd call this a pretty nice advanced setting. So we have a 1/6000th of a second. That's a very fast shutter speed to a very, very slow shutter speed of 30 seconds. So the shutter can stay open for 30 seconds. You're going to need a tripod for this. I've had a lot of fun with this. This is really, really excellent. Here you have the auto exposure lock. So it's nice to have control of the ISO and the shutter speed at the same time. If I want a more grainier looking photo, I can jack up that ISO, have a quicker shutter speed, or I can keep that shutter open longer and pull down the ISO and have a nice grain-free image. Then on this side, we've just got gallery. You can start video, take a picture, and then exit out of this. So along the top here, we are fixed at an f1.8 aperture, so that's always going to stay there, but the rest of this you have pretty awesome control over. And I've had a lot of fun with this camera, so what I want to do right now is to show you the images that I've taken and video. I also did a little bit of a comparison with the Galaxy S6, so you can see how this performs. So let's go ahead and check out those photos and videos. The first thing that I really appreciated with this camera, and one of the first things I noticed, was just how nice of a bokeh this could create. We get a nice blurred background. So I have a little helper here. This is Tino or Valentino, and that is Alejandro, which is the frog. So these guys are really tiny. I'm able to show just how good this is with macrofocus. I also really like the shallow depth of field. In my tests against the Galaxy S6, I see that the G4 is able to perform a little bit better with the macrofocus, getting a nice and sharp macrofocus, but otherwise I think that the G4 and the S6 perform similarly. A few days ago, Littlefoot the Inchworm made a debut on my channel. I was showcasing just how nice of a shallow depth of field we get here also in video, and it does really well with the macrofocus. Nice and sharp image on that little inchworm. So really very impressed, although I would prefer using a tripod here. So going out and about in the real world and testing skin tones, I think that they look quite natural, although sometimes I see that they can have a little bit of an orangey tone to them, especially when it comes to the front-facing camera. My biggest disappointment over the Galaxy S6 is how the G4 does with HDR. I noticed that when taking pictures of people's faces, you don't get an image that's lined up exactly properly. There was very little movement here, and I can see a little bit of a blur next to John's ear. I also see the same thing on my parents' faces, but when looking at the Galaxy S6, we don't see the same thing at all. So I think that the S6 has it beat if you're going to be using HDR from a bit of a distance. Now let's dive a little bit further into using HDR. It definitely does help. I noticed that the G4 does struggle with highlights to begin with, where the S6 does a lot better. But I see in anything with skies, keeping HDR on really does help the G4 perform better. I think it's best to keep auto HDR on, or at least try to take an HDR picture along with your normal picture, or you might get an exposure like this. This is after using HDR, and I can still see some burned areas in the sky. Now here we have the Galaxy S6. This is without HDR, and then when we look at the HDR photo, it looks much better. One bit that I notice constantly about the Galaxy S6 is that the G4 tends to have more natural looking colors. I see that the S6 ends up having a little bit darker images, a little bit more contrast, and definitely more saturation to them. I think that everything is going to come down to preference, but I think that I like the colors of the G4 better, but I notice that the G4 has more of a coolish white balance, where I kind of like the warmer white balance on the Galaxy S6 in some circumstances, but not all. So now we are getting into midday and low lighting tests. I have both cameras on everything automatic. I think that both of them perform admirably in these first two shots. Now it's gotten a little bit darker. We have the G4 here, and I think that it's done pretty admirably, especially with the white balance. But when we take a look at the Galaxy S6, I can see that it's kind of skewing the white balance to being a little bit more warmer than it should. So I think the G4 gets the upper hand here. I can also see more detail on the G4. I also notice in lower lighting that the S6 tends to struggle with focus a little bit. You can use the manual focus and it seems to do just fine after that point, but the G4 was able to get it right the first time. Now on these next set of tests, this is where the S6 is not able to keep up. So here is S6 on manual mode. This is the best that I can eke out of it. It looks pretty good. There's a bit of lighting there, a good bit of detail. But here's the G4. We have even more lighting. So this is the G4 with its manual mode, but once I switch over to having the shutter open for 2 seconds, you can see that it does really well. It's a nice sharp image. We've got a lot of lighting in there. And then I was able to jump it up to 4 seconds, and you can see that definitely there's a lot of lighting. And this is just another white balance. You can control all these nice settings all at the same time, which I really admired. So here we have the S6 with the best that it can do in low lighting. And then here we have the G4. Now keep in mind, for some of these brighter examples here, you do need to have a tripod, or at least keep your hand incredibly steady. And then here I was able to test the laser autofocus on the sink. This was in a pitch black room and I was still able to find that sink. And then I used a hand laser to draw hello in the sink. This was an 8-second exposure. So if you keep it real still, you can keep that shutter open for a long time and get some real nice images. And this is just not an option that we have on the S6, so it's a lot of fun. So now I want to mention just a little bit about the post-processing of the LG G4 images. I think the LG does a good job with the color rendering. The colors look pretty natural, not too oversaturated. But what I see is that they add a lot of noise reduction or sharpening, and I kind of see that they trade off. I took an image in HDR and saw a terrible amount of sharpening, and then I took it off the HDR mode and I didn't see any sharpening. Rather, I ended up seeing a lot of noise reduction instead. So it seems to me that they like to add a lot of sharpening in order to keep their HDR pictures looking sharp, and otherwise there's just a ton of noise reduction, and it really pulls down the amount of details that we can see in the images, unfortunately. Either way, I don't think that this overprocessing is too consequential because I only really notice it when I really pixel peep and zoom in far. So it's really not anything that anybody is going to have to worry about. And then again, you can just also take an image in RAW if you'd like to and go mess around with that yourself in Lightroom if you don't like what LG is doing with their processing. Okay, so pause just for a second. I want to start talking about the video. So this is interesting because here we have this great camera on the G4. At least it has a pretty awesome lens, and it really does the smartphone world justice in the image department. But I feel like they couldn't have made the video department feel any more like an afterthought. There is no ability to enable or disable their stabilization, which I find to be a little overactive. There's no 60 frames per second option like the Galaxy S6, and their 4K video quality is only at 30 megabits per second, where you have the Galaxy S6 and other 4K video qualities that are over 48 or more megabits per second. When you have such a low bit rate at that resolution, it looks like a really low resolution video. If anything, in regards to video on this camera, I would keep the camera on a tripod to get the best result. So I'm really looking to xdadevelopers.com with some of the developers over there to make some good mods for this camera to get that 60 frames per second back and maybe do something with the camera's only 30 megabits per second for 4K video. So now let's take a look at the video. It looks so dim. I'll have to see once I get out of here. Ice caves. And just waterfalls everywhere. It's too pretty. I'm overwhelmed. I'm gonna die. Look how pretty. So I licked the ice wall. It was a little salty. Oh, now John had a taste. Do you see what I'm saying? It's a little, it's a little salty.
All the dirt is filtered out.
Did you taste it?
I didn't taste it.
Taste the wall.
Why would I taste the wall?
Because it's good.
Well, a sane person would not.
Well, who said I'm safe? Bundled up because we are at the ice caves. And at the ice caves, it's very cold. Suddenly there's a very big temperature difference. See this behind me? I licked it. I got to taste it. It was salty. It was good. And John had some too. Didn't you, John? It's not sure what it's doing. Ah, good. Okay, this is Littlefoot. See how well the macrofocus does. Oh, he's trying to do his acrobatics. You got the legs in the front and in the back. Don't bite me. See, this is what nerds get very, very entranced by. An inchworm named Littlefoot. So cute.
Thank you.
You see the dandelion? You see how big it is compared to my head? So I want to try to see if I can blow. This is so soft. You ready?
Ready.
Can you see it?
Oh. There they go. Off to start a new family.
Fly! 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 Okay. So wrapping everything up, I have to thank you everyone for watching. This has been Erica, the technology nerd who likes to film stuff. Please rate, comment, and subscribe. Let me know what you think about this phone. I really do like the camera that's on here. It's not the first bestest camera in the entire world of a smartphone, but it's got a lot of really great features, a lot of great pro features that give you a lot of control over how your images look. I do wish that the video would be better. I'm going to be waiting for some mods from XDA developers. It'll probably help improve the bitrate of the 4K video that I've been seeing. Come the end of the year, once we look at all the phones that have come out, I would have to rate this as one of my top 5 favorites. Really great, sturdy phone. A camera that I can rely on. I can remove the battery. We've also got an SD card slot inside of this. I do like the display. I'm really hoping to get a hold of one of those leather back covers because I think that it would really help with the quality and the feel. So let me know what you think. Is this the phone that you're going to go for, or maybe you'll go with the Galaxy? Let me know.